You're making a huge mistake, David. Patricia Lowry's voice dripped with false sympathy as she handed me the eviction notice, her fingers tight around the paper. But if you just cooperate, I'm sure we can resolve this without further trouble. I stared at the notice, the words blurring as the heat in my chest rose. This wasn't just a minor infraction. This was her trying to run me and my family out of the neighborhood my wife, Sarah, had helped build. And now she was using her position to push us out, twisting rules that never existed. I looked her in the eye. I'm not going anywhere. I let the words hang between us, steady and cold. You're the one who's about to lose everything. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. See, Patricia, the thing is, I leaned in, voice low but certain. You don't have authority here, not like you think you do. That key you're holding, it's not yours to use. I let that sit, let the words sink in like a rock in a pond. Her eyes flickered, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile. I'm just following the rules, David. You're out of line. I shook my head slowly. The only thing out of line here is you. You think you can walk into people's homes, threaten their families, and get away with it? This neighborhood, this community, belongs to my family. We've lived here longer than you've been breathing, Patricia. And you think you can just waltz in and take it from us? A flicker of doubt passed across her face. I could see it. She knew it was true. The Callahans were the foundation of this place. Sarah had spent years making sure it wasn't just a bunch of houses. It was a home. And now Patricia wanted to tear that down, for nothing more than petty control. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I needed to remind her who she was dealing with. This wasn't just about an HOA violation. It wasn't about some petty noise complaint or a missed payment. It was about legacy, about the house where my wife and I had spent years raising our daughter. It was about a promise I'd made to Sarah before she passed, to protect this home, to protect our family, to honor her vision for this community. Lily, my daughter, had grown up here. She spent every morning on our porch with Sarah before school, their laughter filling the air as they talked about everything and nothing. Our front porch wasn't just a place to sit. It was where our family had rooted itself in this neighborhood, where we had a history, where we had a future. Patricia had no idea what she was messing with. Where are you watching from? I asked, locking eyes with her one last time, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, but I could see her control slipping. I could hear it in the way she was gripping the edge of the notice, trying to stay firm. She had chosen the wrong person to screw with. Patricia didn't speak again. Instead, she straightened her blouse and turned, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. It was a dismissive move, one that said everything. She thought she had won, thought the notice would be the final word. But I wasn't done. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there for a long moment, staring at the eviction notice in my hand. My mind raced, but my body stayed still. Lily had seen it too. The way Patricia held her power over us like a sword. That's what she was counting on. Our silence, our fear. I dropped the paper onto the kitchen counter and walked out to the porch. The quiet was almost eerie, like the neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was too calm. The wind rustled through the trees lining the street, their shadows stretching across the sidewalk. I could almost see Sarah there, standing beside me, watching over this place. Watching over Lily, whose face now flickered in my memory. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. It wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't some abstract battle over property rights or HOA bylaws. This was about Lily, about our history here, and about making sure that legacy wasn't erased by someone who thought they could just waltz in and tear it all apart. The Callahans weren't pushovers. We had a name in this neighborhood, a legacy of kindness, of protecting what's ours. We'd been here before anyone else. We'd watched families come and go, and we had seen every inch of this place grow, and it had always been ours. Until now. The door opened behind me, and I didn't need to look to know it was Lily. The soft click of her sneakers against the floor gave her away. I heard the hesitation in her step as she walked toward me. "Dad," she said, her voice hesitant. "What's going on? What did she want?" I turned toward her slowly, Her eyes were wide, a mix of worry and confusion. I could see the conflict there, the desire to not get involved, the fear of what this might mean for her, for us. "You saw that, huh?" I asked softly, keeping my tone even. Lily nodded, chewing on her lower lip, her hands fiddling with the hem of her sweatshirt. "Yeah, I heard her. But, Dad, what if it's just the rules? What if we're the ones in the wrong?" My heart ached, seeing the uncertainty on her face. She was just a kid, 17, still figuring out the world, still learning how to stand up for herself, how to not back down when someone like Patricia Lowry came in with her threats. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. "No, Lily, this isn't about rules. It's about control, about someone trying to take something that isn't theirs." I could see her wrestling with the idea, and I didn't want to force her to make up her mind right then. The whole thing was too much, too fast for her. But she'd come to see it soon enough. I knew she would. "We've always been here," I continued, my voice steady. "This home, our legacy, it's more than just property. It's family. And no one gets to take that from us, not without a fight." Lily didn't say anything for a while, and I didn't push her. We just sat there together, the weight of the situation sinking in. Patricia had shown her cards, but I still had mine. "Where are you watching from?" Because, trust me, this was just the beginning. And the HOA had no idea what it was about to face. Lily wasn't the same after Patricia's visit. She was quieter now, her mind clearly elsewhere. I could see it in the way she fidgeted with her phone, her gaze drifting toward the front door whenever a car passed by. The calm facade she usually wore had cracked, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. She wasn't a little girl anymore. I had watched her grow up, seen her find her way in the world, and now she was teetering on the edge of something she didn't quite understand. This fight wasn't just about the neighborhood or the HOA. It was about her too, her safety, her peace of mind, and I couldn't protect her if she didn't see the danger herself. "Dad," she said one evening as we sat on the porch, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the yard. "I don't know if I want to get involved in this. I mean, what if we're making it worse? What if we're just making things harder for everyone?" Her voice trembled slightly. She was scared, and I couldn't blame her. Being a teenager was hard enough without dealing with a vindictive HOA secretary. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching her question everything she had been raised to believe. I kept my gaze steady, even as my heart ached. "I get it. You're scared, Lily. But this isn't just about rules. This is about control. People like Patricia think they can push us around because we're not fighting back. But we've always fought for what's right. You've seen that your whole life." She hugged her knees to her chest, her brow furrowed. "But I'm not you, Dad. I don't know how to fight like you do. I don't even know what to say to anyone. I don't want everyone staring at me. I don't want them thinking I'm some rebel." "Hey, no one's asking you to be a rebel," I said softly, leaning forward. "This isn't about rebellion. It's about standing up for yourself, for your family, for this house, for Mom. You don't have to fight Patricia on your own, but you have to decide what kind of person you want to be." Lily's eyes welled up, and for a brief moment, I saw the weight of the world in them. She wasn't just scared of the HOA or Patricia. She was scared of what standing up might cost her, of what it meant to take a side in this battle, the fear of standing out, of being noticed. It was something I'd never truly understood, until now. She wiped her eyes quickly, angry at herself for showing weakness. I knew that feeling all too well. But she was stronger than she realized. I saw it, every day in the way she carried herself, the way she stood up for her friends, the way she worked to protect the things that mattered to her. "You don't have to fight alone," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "But you can't back down either. This neighborhood, this legacy, it belongs to us, to you. Don't let anyone make you feel small for standing up for it." Lily stared at the ground for a long time, her mind clearly racing. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked up at me, her expression softer. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I get it. I'll help. I don't know how, but I'll help." I smiled, a sense of relief flooding me. She wasn't there yet, but she was willing to take the first step, and that was all I needed. We sat together in silence for a while, the evening air cooling around us. There was a heaviness to it all, but I felt a glimmer of hope. We were in this together, and no matter how far Patricia pushed, I wasn't going to let her tear us apart. The next few days passed in a blur of research and planning. I kept an eye on Patricia's every move, taking notes, watching for any further signs of her overreach. But it wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about showing the neighbors, showing everyone, that we weren't going to let her destroy what we'd built here. And then, one evening, I got an unexpected call. One of the neighbors, someone I had barely spoken to before, wanted to meet. I didn't know it then, but this was the turning point. The fight wasn't just going to be mine anymore. The next few days dragged on, each one more suffocating than the last. I kept to my routine, watching, documenting, waiting for the moment when Patricia would overstep again. And sure enough, she didn't disappoint. I had barely finished my morning coffee when I saw her car pull up across the street. It was just past 8, and I could already feel the tension building in my chest. She stepped out in her usual sharp, tailored outfit, the kind of look that screamed authority. But there was something different in her stride today, a sense of purpose, of something bigger at play. She didn't knock on any of the other doors. She headed straight for mine. I took a slow breath and stood up, walking to the door. This time, I didn't hesitate. The last encounter had rattled me, but not anymore. This time, I knew what I had to do. The knock echoed through the house, and I opened the door. Patricia stood there, a smug smile on her face, holding what looked like another official letter. "David," she said, her voice sweet but condescending, "I think we need to have a more formal discussion about your property. There's been an ongoing issue with your fence. We've had several complaints from your neighbors." I kept my face neutral. "A fence complaint?" I said, voice steady. "I've had the same fence for years. It's the same one Sarah and I built together when we moved in." Her smile didn't falter. "Well, the HOA has received complaints that it doesn't comply with our new standards. You've been given multiple notices, but you've failed to address it." I raised an eyebrow. "Notices? No one's come by to talk to me about it." Patricia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw something flicker behind her, forced calm. She wasn't prepared for me to be this composed. She expected me to back down, to apologize, to give her something to work with. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. "You should have received the warnings," she said, flipping open the folder in her hand. "It's all in the records. We'll need to discuss how you intend to resolve this issue." I took a deep breath, stepping aside to let her in. "I'm not interested in resolving anything until you explain why the HOA is using its authority to bully its own residents." Patricia stiffened, but she entered without another word. I led her to the living room, where I had placed a chair directly across from where I would sit. I wasn't going to let her have the upper hand this time. She'd come to confront me, but she was about to find out that I was ready for her. "I'll tell you what I'll do," I said as I sat down. "I'll make sure this fence is in full compliance with the HOA, but I'm also going to make sure every one of your violations gets reviewed." Her eyes widened for a brief second before she masked her reaction. "David, this isn't a game. The HOA has the authority to harass people, to threaten them into submission, to use their power to make their lives miserable." "I don't think so." I cut her off. "You've been misusing your position, Patricia, and I'm done letting you walk over me, over this community. You don't get to push us around anymore." I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "You've miscalculated if you think I'm just some quiet neighbor who'll roll over and take it. The Callahans have been here longer than anyone else. We're not the ones who need to be taught a lesson here." For a long moment, Patricia said nothing. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see the tension in her jaw. I had caught her off guard, and she didn't know how to react. "You're making a mistake," she finally said, her voice cold. "You're poking the bear, David. This could get ugly." I stood up, walking toward the window. The neighborhood outside looked the same as always, quiet, peaceful. But the calm before the storm wouldn't last much longer. "I'm not the one making a mistake," I replied, turning back to face her. "You are, and you've underestimated me. This won't be the last time you hear from me. Mark my words." Patricia's eyes flickered again, but she didn't respond. She turned on her heel and walked out the door, but I could feel her lingering frustration in the air. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about taking back control. It was about standing up for everything Sarah and I had worked for. For Lily. The storm was coming, and this time, I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I felt the shift in the air. Something was different. Patricia had backed off for now, but I knew it wouldn't last. The HOA didn't work like that. They didn't give up, not without a fight. And I was certain Patricia wouldn't leave me alone until she had me under her thumb. I had to be ready. Lily and I sat at the kitchen table, the soft clink of our coffee cups the only sound in the otherwise quiet house. The tension from yesterday's encounter still hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. Lily hadn't said much since Patricia's visit, and I could tell she was still struggling with whether she was making the right decision by standing with me. "Dad," she finally spoke, her voice small. "What are we going to do? I mean, how do we even stop her?" I looked at her, my heart heavy. "We fight back. We do things by the book. We take the legal route." Lily's brow furrowed. "But doesn't that just drag things out? What if we lose? What if—" I cut her off gently, placing a hand on hers. "It won't come to that. I've been doing this long enough to know how the system works. Patricia might think she's in control, but she's not. She's been stepping on the wrong toes for a while now, and it's time someone called her out." I stood up, walking toward the living room, where I had been keeping a stack of HOA records. I had spent hours digging through the bylaws, trying to find any sign that Patricia had been overstepping. And sure enough, I'd found something. A clause in the HOA's governing documents that directly contradicted the powers she had been wielding. The more I read, the more certain I became that Patricia's actions had been illegal, and worse, I had the evidence to prove it. "Lily, listen," I said, pulling out a sheet of paper. "This here is where Patricia made her mistake. The HOA's master key policy. She's been using it without proper authority. And that's not just a violation of our privacy. It's a violation of the law." Lily stood up, walking over to the table where I had spread the papers out. "So, this means she can't just walk into our house like that?" I shook my head. "Exactly. She's been misusing her position to intimidate and invade privacy. And it's not just our house. She's been doing it to others too. We're not the only ones." Lily's eyes widened as she read the clause. "So, what do we do now?" I looked her in the eye, feeling a rush of determination. "We take this to the authorities. We file a formal complaint. We put her on notice that we know what she's been doing." I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but I also saw something else, a spark of confidence. She wasn't afraid anymore, not like before. We were in this together, and she was ready to stand with me. Just as I was about to pick up the phone to call the local authorities, the doorbell rang. I froze for a second, my heart skipping a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. Lily and I exchanged a glance, and then I walked to the door, my steps cautious. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Mrs. Thompson, one of our neighbors, standing on the porch. She looked around nervously, as if making sure no one was watching. "David," she said in a hushed voice, "I need to talk to you. It's about Patricia. I know what she's been doing, and I think you need to know that you're not the only one she's been targeting." I stepped aside, allowing Mrs. Thompson to enter. "What do you mean?" She glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice even more. "She's been using that master key to get into people's homes without their knowledge. Not just you, a few others too. I don't know how much longer she thinks she can keep this up, but I don't think you should fight this alone. If you're going to go after her, you're going to need backup." My heart raced as Mrs. Thompson spoke, the pieces finally clicking into place. Patricia wasn't just a bully to one family. She had been targeting the entire neighborhood, using her position to invade our privacy and intimidate us into submission. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a community-wide issue. I turned to Lily, a new determination in my eyes. "We're not just fighting for us anymore, Lil. We're fighting for everyone who's been hurt by Patricia's abuse of power." Lily nodded, her expression set. "Let's do it." The following morning, I gathered the documents and made my way to the local office of the Homeowners Association. It was time to take this fight straight to the source. No more waiting, no more hoping Patricia would back off. The ball was in my court now, and I wasn't about to let her call the shots anymore. Lily had offered to come with me, but I insisted she stay behind. This was my fight, and I didn't want her to carry any more weight than she already had. As I pulled into the parking lot, I felt a surge of adrenaline, but also a weight. It wasn't just about the HOA anymore. It was about standing up for what's right, for Lily, for everything Sarah had believed in. The HOA office sat at the back of a row of other business suites in the middle of town, tucked away like a secret nobody wanted to admit existed. When I walked in, the receptionist barely glanced up from her computer screen. She didn't need to. She knew exactly who I was. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice stiff but professional. "Patricia's expecting you." I nodded and walked down the narrow hallway to her office. The door was ajar, and I could hear the sound of papers shuffling from inside. When I stepped through, Patricia looked up, her expression instantly hardening. "David," she said, a forced smile on her lips, "I see you've come to discuss the matter further." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I walked straight to the chair across from her desk, slamming the stack of papers down with a loud thud. The documents were all there, the bylaw violations, the misuse of the master key, the numerous complaints from neighbors who had been too afraid to come forward. "You've got a lot of explaining to do," I said, my voice low but unwavering. Patricia's eyes darted to the papers before returning to my face. She knew what was coming. "David," she began, her voice smooth but tinged with panic, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're just misunderstanding." "Cut the crap," I interrupted, leaning forward. "I've been going over the HOA records, and I've found everything I need. The master key policy is clear. You've been using it without authorization. You've been invading people's privacy. And now you're going to have to answer for it." Her face turned pale, and I could see her trying to gather her composure. The smug confidence she had worn for so long was slipping away, and I could tell she was starting to feel the pressure. "You can't just waltz in here and throw accusations around," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "I have every right to intimidate people, to break the law." "No, Patricia, you don't," I cut her off, watching her carefully. "I've already spoken to several neighbors who've had the same experience with you. You violated their trust, and you violated the law." There was a long silence as Patricia swallowed hard, clearly calculating her next move. But she didn't have a leg to stand on anymore. She was cornered. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," I said, my voice cold and resolute. "You've hurt enough people already. It ends now." Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but the door to her office suddenly opened, and Mrs. Thompson stepped in, followed by a couple of other familiar faces from the neighborhood. They had come. "David's right," Mrs. Thompson said firmly, crossing her arms. "You've been using your position to hurt people, and it stops here. We're not going to let you bully us anymore." I looked around the room at the others, neighbors I had only spoken to in passing, yet they were standing with me now, united. Patricia's face darkened as she realized the extent of the opposition she was facing. "I don't think you understand," Patricia said, her voice shaking now. "I've done nothing wrong. This is my job, my responsibility." "No, Patricia," Mrs. Thompson interrupted. "You've been abusing your position, and we're not afraid of you anymore. We're all coming together to make sure this ends." Patricia's eyes flickered to the door, and I could see the panic rising in her. But there was no way out. The truth was out now, and she had no more power to hold over us. "We're taking this higher," I said, my tone final. "You've crossed the line, and we won't let you get away with it." There was a moment of stillness in the room, and then Patricia finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't over, David." I stood tall, a calm resolve settling over me. "No, it's just begun." I found Lily at the school library after classes, hunched under the hum of fluorescent lights. The place smelled of paper and lemon cleaner. The silence felt heavy. She looked up when I sat, eyes red, mascara smudged. She'd promised to help. I hadn't expected a confession. She closed her laptop like it was a secret she didn't want to keep. "Dad," she said, voice barely steady. "I recorded Patricia the night she locked me out." My head tilted. The word recorded sat between us like a loaded fact. Outside, a car idled far down the lot. The clock on the wall ticked loud. "Go on," I said. "I was shaking," she went on. "But I thought if I had something, proof, I wouldn't feel so crazy. So I filmed her using the master key on the side gate. I got the whole thing." She even whispered, "They don't know I can go into any house." Heat moved through me in a slow, dangerous way. Evidence like that wasn't just useful, it was explosive. "Where is it?" I asked, steadying my voice like I'd done 100 times in interviews and stakeouts. She slid a phone across the table. "I backed it up to the cloud," she said. I didn't keep the original on my phone. I was afraid she'd notice. Her hands trembled, but there was grit under the fear. "I couldn't tell you because I didn't want to drag you down. I thought of chain of custody, timestamps, verification." "Good," I said. We'll secure it and get a time-stamped copy. This gives us leverage." Her confession loosened something else. She looked down, then back up, voice quieter. "There's more. The night before, I followed her to the community lot. I stayed in the shadows like you taught me. I heard her on the phone. She said, 'Don't worry, the logs will say random checks. Nobody checks backups.' The line landed with the weight of an indictment. If she was admitting to falsifying logs or relying on unexamined backups, the paper trail could be poisoned. That fed right into the legal argument about unauthorized authority and misused access. "Did you get that on the recording?" I asked. "No, I wasn't recording then. I was scared." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But I remember the words. I can show you where I stood." Mrs. Thompson might remember seeing Patricia that night, too. We leaned over the table and mapped next steps. Secure the file. Get independent timestamps. Talk to Mrs. Thompson and another neighbor who'd complained, then decide whether to go straight to the police or file with the HOA and local authorities. My PI instincts wanted verification first. Copy, timestamp, witness statements, so nothing could be dismissed as fabrication. "You did the right thing," I told her. "You turned fear into proof." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry I kept it from you. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to make you worry." "You didn't have to carry it alone," I said. "But you did the important part. This isn't whispers anymore." The library light hummed above us. The evidence she'd captured would force a response. Patricia could deny everything, but an authenticated recording of her, unlocking a residential gate, and admitting to unfettered access would be hard to wave away. The possible dangers flashed through my mind, how Patricia might react, whether she'd try to destroy logs or intimidate neighbors. But the legal path had teeth now. "Tomorrow," I said, standing, "we make copies, secure timestamps, and talk to Mrs. Thompson. We'll prepare witness statements. After that, we decide whether to bring the police in or file the suit." Lily pushed the phone back to me. "I'll show you where I stood. I'll tell Mrs. Thompson what I heard. I want this over." We left the library with plans sharpened and a dangerous calm in our chests. Lily had crossed from conflicted to collaborator. Her confession had handed us a tool that could undo Patricia's secrecy. The fight had shifted. We had sound now. We had an edge. I felt both proud and terrified, because once truth was unleashed, there was no taking it back, only consequences. Now. The next morning, we were ready. The plan had formed over the past few hours. Gather everything, make sure we had verifiable proof, and then hit Patricia with it when she least expected it. It was methodical, calculated, and we weren't about to leave anything to chance. Lily and I stood in front of the printer, the hum of the machine filling the room, as the time-stamped files spat out one by one. Each document, each piece of evidence, was carefully organized. The original video file had been backed up to 3 separate locations: the cloud, a local hard drive, and an external drive I planned to store in a secure location. The timestamp was key, ensuring it was protected from any future claims of tampering. I wanted to be able to show we had everything locked down from the moment we received it. "Do you think it'll be enough?" Lily asked, her voice betraying the weight of the moment. I turned from the printer and met her gaze. "It has to be," I said, trying to keep the doubt out of my voice. "If she tries to deny it, we'll hit her with everything we've got. The fact that she was caught red-handed and then made a slip-up admitting it changes the game." Lily nodded, the decision clear on her face. She was ready to move forward, no longer the hesitant teenager who had second-guessed herself. This was a fight for what was right, and she understood that now. I could see the shift in her. She wasn't just helping me anymore. She was owning this battle. We made our way to Mrs. Thompson's house just before noon, hoping to catch her before the HOA meeting later that afternoon. Mrs. Thompson was more than willing to help. The previous day's conversation had stirred something in her that couldn't be ignored. She had dealt with Patricia's aggressive tactics for years, but hadn't had the courage to speak out until now. "You don't know how long I've waited for someone to do something about this," Mrs. Thompson said as we sat at her kitchen table. "I thought I was the only one, but you've opened my eyes. Patricia's been doing this for years. She tries to intimidate everyone, but no one talks about it. We're going to change that," I said, handing her a copy of the time-stamped video. "I need you to go on record about what you've seen, and I need you to back up the other neighbors who've been too afraid to speak up. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about the whole neighborhood." Mrs. Thompson nodded gravely. "I've got your back, David. I'll help. but you need to be careful. Patricia has connections. She won't go down without a fight." I gave her a reassuring smile. "We'll be careful, but we're done hiding from her." Once we had Mrs. Thompson's statement, we moved to the next step, reaching out to the other neighbors. Each conversation was a delicate one, because they all feared retaliation. Some agreed to sign a joint petition. Others provided testimony of their own experiences, all confirming Patricia's abuse of power. It was slow going, but the tide was turning. Neighbors who once kept their heads down were now stepping forward. By the time we returned home, it was nearly dusk. I sat down at my desk, sorting through the evidence. The pieces were all there: video footage, time-stamped backups, witness statements, and the growing list of supporters. It was time to make the call. I dialed the number for the local authorities first, ensuring they were aware of the nature of the complaint and the evidence we had. Once the officer on the other end assured me they'd begin their investigation, I turned to the second part of the plan: the HOA itself. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing the HOA's legal department. A few moments later, I was speaking with someone I hadn't expected to be so cooperative. Maybe they were caught off guard, or maybe they knew they were facing a much bigger issue than Patricia. "I've got irrefutable evidence of misuse of HOA authority and unauthorized access to private property," I said, keeping my voice even. "If this matter isn't addressed immediately, I will take legal action. You have until the end of the week to respond." The line went silent for a moment, and then the voice on the other end asked for the details. I provided everything: links to the cloud storage, names of the witnesses, and the clear, time-stamped evidence we had accumulated. I wasn't leaving any room for negotiation. When I hung up, I sat back in my chair and took a long breath. The pieces were in place. The chessboard had been set. Patricia had made her move, and now it was time for us to checkmate. Lily joined me in the kitchen, her face a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "What now?" she asked. "Now," I said, looking at the paper spread out in front of me. "We wait. And when they come for us, we'll be ready." The next 2 days felt like they lasted an eternity. The air was thick with anticipation, but we stuck to the plan: secure the evidence, stay ahead of Patricia's moves, and make sure we were prepared for the worst. I spent most of my time in front of my computer, double-checking every file, every timestamp. I didn't want any loopholes. The last thing I wanted was for Patricia or her legal team to find some way to discredit us. As far as I was concerned, we had to be airtight. Lily was more restless than I expected, pacing between the living room and the kitchen, her nerves visible. "Dad, what if she finds out what we're doing? What if she tries something? What if she—" "She won't," I said, cutting her off as I shut the laptop and sat down next to her. "We've done everything we can to cover our tracks, and as soon as the authorities and the HOA legal department get this information, she's not going to have the power to do anything." She looked at me, doubt still clouding her eyes. "But what if she does? What if she retaliates?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "If she does, we'll be ready. We've got backup, we've got the law on our side, and we've got a community that's had enough of her." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. This wasn't just a fight about property lines and bylaws anymore. It was about standing up to a bully who'd made everyone in the neighborhood afraid to speak out. Later that afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. The local authorities had reviewed the evidence. They wanted to meet with me in person to discuss the next steps. I hung up the phone and turned to Lily. "This is it," I said, the gravity of it finally hitting me. "We're going in." "Are you sure we're ready?" she asked, standing up, her voice filled with the same mix of fear and determination I'd been feeling. "What if they don't take us seriously?" "They will," I said. "We've got everything we need. They can't ignore this." We met with the officers at the police station an hour later, where they were already going through the evidence. The sergeant in charge, a man named Thomas Reyes, had a no-nonsense attitude. He looked over the video footage and witness statements before locking eyes with me. "David, this is big," he said, his voice calm but serious. "We're going to move forward with a formal investigation. This isn't just about unauthorized key usage. It's about a pattern of intimidation and misuse of authority. We'll need a statement from you, from Mrs. Thompson, and from the other neighbors who are willing to speak out." "I've already gathered statements," I said. "And I've got one more piece of the puzzle, Patricia's admissions. Lily overheard her on the phone a few nights ago. I believe she was falsifying records. Reyes nodded, jotting down notes. We'll add that to the report. This is exactly the kind of thing we need to bring her down. The meeting lasted another hour as we went over the details. The officers were confident in their ability to proceed, but I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. We weren't just challenging Patricia anymore. We were challenging the system she'd been operating within. It wasn't just her reputation on the line, it was the HOA's authority. After we left the station, I dropped Lily off at her friend's house to give her a break from the tension. As I drove home, my thoughts raced. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. We still had to deal with Patricia, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. The next step was simple. Wait for the investigation to unfold. But the problem with waiting was the unknown. What would Patricia do next? What kind of retaliation would she try? The answer came that evening, around 6. I was sitting on the porch, staring at the neighborhood, when I saw her car pull up in front of my house. It was too late for a friendly chat, too late for anything other than a confrontation. Patricia stepped out of the car, her usual confident stride replaced with something darker, an edge of desperation. She didn't knock this time, she just walked straight to the door. I opened it before she could knock, standing in the doorway, calm but ready. "You're making a mistake, David," Patricia said, her voice tight. "You've gone too far with this. I'll make sure your little campaign comes to a very abrupt end." I crossed my arms, looking down at her. "You've already made your mistake, Patricia, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." Her eyes flared, but she didn't speak. She turned and stormed off the porch, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. I watched her leave, a calm satisfaction settling in my chest. She could threaten, she could try to intimidate, but she couldn't undo the truth. I walked into Karen Morales' office with the evidence folder under my arm and a sense that the next move would decide everything. Her office smelled of coffee and printouts. A city map tacked to the wall looked like a battle plan. Karen was calm, exactly what I needed. She glanced at the time-stamped video on my tablet, then at Lily, who sat straighter than she had a week before. "We'll file the petition," Karen said. "Timing matters. If we do this wrong, Patricia buries it in procedure. If we do it right, we can strip her authority before the next board meeting." I nodded. "I want it clean, no easy outs." We went through everything, logs, timestamps, witness notes. Karen pointed to the bylaws clause and the municipal code requiring formal delegation for anyone holding a master key. If Patricia hadn't been properly appointed, many of the HOA's actions could be voided. It wasn't flashy, but it was surgical. "This is our opening," she said, tapping the page. "We'll request a temporary injunction to stop use of the master key pending review, and demand all access logs and copies of any random check notices Patricia claims she issued. Missing or altered logs strengthen our case." Lily asked, "Does the recording speed things up?" "It does," Karen replied. "But recordings get attacked on technical grounds. We'll have an expert certify the file and testify to its authenticity. Procedural pressure, injunctions, discovery, creates a legal snare. Patricia may be bold, but the law has ways of cornering the bold." I felt a cold certainty settle in. "File everything," I said. "Injunctions, discovery requests, letters to the HOA's insurer. If there's insurance exposure, they won't want trial." Karen's fingers danced over the keyboard. "Understand the interim could be ugly. There'll be a hearing. Patricia may show with counsel, trying to discredit the tape, the witnesses, chain of custody. We need affidavits, sworn statements from Mrs. Thompson and others, and independent timestamps on Lily's file." "We've got that," I said. "I logged every transfer. Chain of custody is documented." Karen allowed a small, sharp smile. "Good. We'll move for expedited discovery. If they stonewall, we'll seek sanctions." By mid-afternoon, she filed the packet, a motion for a temporary restraining order, a demand for expedited discovery, and a notice to the HOA's counsel. The court assigned a docket number and set an early hearing. The legal engine had started. Outside Karen's window, the neighborhood looked ordinary. Kids on bikes, sprinklers hissing, but normalcy felt fragile. I pictured Patricia's face when the papers were served, the humiliation that would follow. It was a private, quick relief, and then I pushed it aside. The law moved in small gears. Hurry could break it. I called the local reporter, who'd agreed to watch the story. I couldn't risk leaking details that might jeopardize the injunction, but I told him the court had accepted a filing about alleged misuse of HOA authority and unauthorized entry. He said the paper would be there when the hearing became public. That evening we kept working. I drafted sworn statements while Lily called neighbors, coaxing reluctant testimonies into clear accounts. Mrs. Thompson handwrote a statement. Mr. Ruiz brought his ledger of odd visits. I verified signatures, watched pen meet paper. The ritual, ink, witnesses sworn, felt like armor. Karen scheduled a digital forensics expert to certify Lily's file. She warned about predictable attacks on metadata and how to counter them. We also sent a demand to the HOA's insurer outlining liability. Small legal gears meshing, subpoena, affidavits, expert report. The night held the charge calm. I slept little, listening to the house breathe, imagining how the porch would look after the hearing. Empty, waiting, healed. Lily sat on that porch later, the cool air a quiet ally. She reached for my hand, and her fingers trembled. "Are you scared?" she asked. Terrified, I admitted, but ready. The paperwork had set events in motion. The court date was the next battlefield. We had positioned ourselves. Now the system would decide whether Patricia's small tyrannies stood or fell. The courtroom was packed, but the only thing I could focus on was the small stack of documents I had laid in front of me. Everything we'd worked for, every witness, every statement, every shred of evidence, had led to this moment. Patricia sat at her table, her usual smugness replaced by something else. Defiance, maybe, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. Lily sat beside me, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the faces of the neighbors who had shown up to support us. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Ruiz, and a few others were seated quietly in the gallery, their presence a reminder that this fight wasn't just about me or Lily, it was about all of us. We'd taken a stand against someone who had used her power to control the lives of people she should have been serving, and today, the law would decide whether she had gone too far. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, looked down at the papers in front of her before glancing at the attorneys on both sides. "We're here today to hear motions regarding the misuse of the master key and the unauthorized entry into private property," she said. "Mr. Callahan, I assume you are prepared to present your case." I nodded, standing up and walking to the podium. My heart was beating loud in my ears, but I steadied myself. I had the facts, I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to back down. "Your Honor," I began, my voice carrying in the quiet room, "what we have here is a clear violation of not only the HOA's own bylaws, but also basic rights to privacy and property. My client, Mrs. Callahan, and I have gathered evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis to show that Patricia Lowry, in her role as HOA secretary, has overstepped her bounds in ways that have caused harm to my family and others in this community." I paused to let the weight of my words settle. Patricia's attorney, slick, young, and confident, stood to object, but the judge waved him off. "Go on, Mr. Callahan," she said. "Thank you, Your Honor." I presented the timeline of events, showing how Patricia had abused her access to the master key and violated the trust of homeowners by entering their properties without permission. I displayed the time-stamped video footage Lily had recorded, showing Patricia admitting to her actions. I walked the judge through the paperwork that demonstrated Patricia had falsified access logs, making it look as though the checks had been random when in fact they were anything but. As I spoke, I could see Patricia's composure slipping. She fidgeted in her chair, her jaw clenched, but she didn't interrupt. The evidence was speaking for itself. Then came the moment I had been preparing for, the last piece of the puzzle. "We have a community who's been too afraid to speak up for years," I said, "but today they are here to testify. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Ruiz, and others are willing to take the stand and confirm their own experiences with Patricia's intimidation tactics." I turned to the gallery, and for the first time, Patricia saw the faces of the people who had stood with us. The realization hit her like a brick. These weren't just witnesses. These were neighbors who had been bullied into silence but were no longer afraid. Patricia's attorney stood and objected, but the judge didn't seem interested. "You may continue," she said. I knew we were close. The weight of the case was in our favor now, and with every word I spoke, the distance between Patricia and victory grew. Mrs. Thompson was the first to take the stand, her voice strong and clear as she spoke about the way Patricia had manipulated her position to intimidate others. She spoke about the way Patricia had used the master key to check on people's homes without their consent, and how, when anyone raised concerns, Patricia had silenced them. Mrs. Thompson didn't waver. She had lived in this neighborhood long enough to know what was right, and today, she was standing up for it. Next was Mr. Ruiz, who corroborated everything Mrs. Thompson had said, adding his own experiences with Patricia's heavy-handed tactics. By the time the last neighbor spoke, it was clear Patricia's power was slipping away. There was nothing she could do to stop it. The judge adjourned for a brief recess, and as the courtroom cleared out, I looked at Lily. Her face was full of hope, but there was something more in her eyes. Resolve. She had helped bring this about, and now we were on the brink of ending this nightmare. I walked out of the courtroom with a feeling I hadn't expected. Relief. This wasn't over yet, but we were on the winning side. All that was left was for the judge to rule. The final verdict came quicker than I expected, but the wait felt like years. After a brief recess, the judge returned to the bench and called the courtroom back to order. Patricia sat stiffly at her table, her face pale but set in defiance, as if she was waiting for some miracle to intervene. Lily sat beside me, her fingers tightly wrapped around mine. I could feel the tension in her grip, a reflection of my own nerves. We'd done everything right. The evidence was solid. The witnesses had been unwavering. The law was on our side. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that anything could happen. The judge cleared her throat and addressed the court. Having reviewed the evidence presented, along with the testimony of the witnesses, it is clear that the defendant, Patricia Lowry, has overstepped the bounds of her authority as HOA secretary. The evidence, including the video footage, time-stamped files, and witness statements, demonstrate a clear violation of privacy, unauthorized access to properties, and a pattern of intimidation and manipulation. Therefore, I am granting the request for a temporary injunction and ordering that all use of the master key be suspended pending further investigation. The room was silent for a moment. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but only halfway. Patricia's face twisted in disbelief, but there was no outburst, no dramatic collapse. She simply stood, collecting her papers with the same quiet arrogance she'd walked in with. But the room had changed. The balance had shifted. The judge continued. Furthermore, I am ordering that the HOA provide all access logs and any related documentation within 5 business days. Failure to comply will result in sanctions. My chest tightened as the judge wrapped up the proceedings. This case is far from over, she said. We will reconvene once the investigation is complete. Mr. Callahan, I trust you and your witnesses will be available for the next steps. I exhaled. It was over for now. Patricia had lost. She had been exposed, and the HOA's system, the one she'd hidden behind for so long, had cracked. Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something I hadn't seen in a while. Peace. It wasn't the peace of having won, but the peace of knowing that she had helped bring about something bigger than herself. I think we did it, she said softly. We did, I replied, feeling the weight of those words settle in. But it's not over yet. We have to make sure the right thing happens now. The courtroom emptied out, but we stayed behind for a few moments, taking it all in. The victory felt incomplete without the final chapter. Patricia still had to answer for her actions, and the HOA needed to be held accountable for what had happened under her watch. But today, we had turned the tide. As we walked out of the courthouse, I could hear the hum of the world continuing outside, the same sounds I'd grown used to, the distant traffic, the murmur of voices. But today, it felt different. It felt like we had won something important, not just for us, but for the whole community. I turned to Lily as we reached the door. "Where are you watching from?" I asked with a small smile. She looked at me, a proud grin crossing her face. "Right here, with you." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally on solid ground.